The first time I met Emma Carter, she looked like someone who had every reason in the world to leave. She stood alone at the end of an old wooden dock, staring across Silver Lake while a summer storm rolled over the mountains. The wind pulled loose strands of chestnut hair across her face, but she didn't seem to notice. She was wearing an oversized gray sweatshirt despite the July heat, her hands buried deep inside the front pocket as if she were trying to hold herself together. I only noticed her because I had come to the lake for exactly the opposite reason. I was trying to remember how to live. 6 months earlier, my father had died unexpectedly from a heart attack. One ordinary Tuesday morning, he kissed my mother goodbye, complained about the price of gas, and drove to work. By noon, he was gone. People tell you grief comes in stages. They're wrong. Grief comes in waves that don't care whether you're standing or already drowning. After the funeral, I stopped answering phone calls. I quit coaching Little League. I stopped showing up to poker nights with friends I'd known since high school. My apartment became a place where dishes piled into the sink and unopened mail gathered dust on the kitchen table. Eventually, my older sister, Rachel, had enough. "You need to get out of that apartment." "I'm fine." "You haven't shaved in 2 weeks." "I'm grieving." "No," she said quietly. "You're disappearing." She handed me the keys to our parents' old cabin on Silver Lake. "Go there for a while." So I did. For nearly 3 weeks, my routine barely changed. I'd wake early, drink coffee on the porch, fish for an hour or two, read until sunset, and avoid thinking too much. It almost worked, until I saw Emma. I wasn't trying to interrupt her. Honestly, I almost turned around and left. There was something about the way she stared across the water that made the entire dock feel sacred. But the old boards creaked beneath my boots. She glanced over her shoulder. Her eyes were striking, not because of their color, they were somewhere between green and hazel, but because they looked exhausted. Not sleepy, just tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Oh," she said softly. "Sorry, I didn't realize someone else was here. You don't have to leave." I wasn't planning to. Neither of us spoke after that. Rain began tapping against the lake in scattered drops. "I'm Noah," I finally said. She hesitated just long enough that I wondered if she would answer. "Emma." Then silence returned. Oddly, it wasn't uncomfortable. Sometimes two strangers can recognize something broken in each other without asking questions. The rain became heavier. "You should probably head back," I said. She smiled faintly. "I probably should." Instead, she sat down on the edge of the dock, letting her feet dangle inches above the water. I surprised myself by sitting beside her. For nearly 20 minutes, we watched the storm. No introductions beyond our names, no small talk, no explanations, just rain. When lightning flashed over the mountains, she finally spoke. "Do you ever feel like everyone expects you to be okay before you actually are?" The question landed harder than she could have known. "Every day." She nodded. "I thought maybe I was the only one." I laughed quietly. "I promise you aren't." That tiny conversation somehow felt more honest than entire evenings I'd spent talking to people who had known me for years. The storm eventually chased us off the dock. We walked toward the gravel parking lot together. "My grandmother owns the Blue Cottage," Emma said, pointing toward a weathered house tucked beneath enormous pine trees. "I'm helping her for the summer." "I'm staying in my parents' cabin." She smiled politely. "I guess we're neighbors." "I guess we are." Then she climbed into an aging Jeep and drove away. I figured that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I found her arguing with a stubborn lawnmower. It had died halfway through her grandmother's yard. Emma yanked the starter cord hard enough that I thought she'd rip it off completely. "You planning to threaten it into working?" I asked. She spun around. "Oh, the mower's winning." "It knows." I laughed for the first time in what felt like months. "I used to repair small engines." "You serious?" "Mostly." She stepped aside dramatically. "Be my guest." The carburetor was clogged. 10 minutes later, the engine roared back to life, and I stared at it like I just performed open heart surgery. "You're kidding." "Nope." "You've officially become my favorite person today." "I'll take the title." She looked almost embarrassed by her own enthusiasm. "I should pay you." "Not necessary." "At least let me make you lunch." "You don't owe me lunch." She crossed her arms. "I know." "Then why?" "Because my grandmother raised me to thank people properly." I pretended to think about it. "Depends." "On?" "Can you cook?" She grinned. "I guess you'll find out." Her grandmother, Margaret, welcomed me like I'd been coming over for years. She couldn't have been more than 5 feet tall, but somehow managed to command every room she entered. "So you're the young man fixing things." "I fixed one lawnmower." "Today?" I laughed. Emma rolled her eyes. Grandma exaggerates. Margaret ignored her completely. Sit down. There wasn't really an option. Within 30 minutes, I was eating homemade chicken pot pie while Margaret told stories about the lake dating back 50 years. Emma mostly listened, smiling whenever her grandmother drifted into one of her long-winded memories. Watching them together revealed a different side of Emma. She laughed more. She relaxed. The heaviness I'd noticed at the dock hadn't disappeared, but it wasn't crushing her every second. When lunch ended, Margaret disappeared inside for a nap. Emma walked me to the porch. Sorry about her. I liked her. Most people do. We stood there awkwardly. I haven't seen you around here before, I said. I usually don't come. No? My parents divorced after my grandfather died. Everyone sort of scattered. I'm sorry. She shrugged. It was years ago. But she said it the way people talk about wounds that never really healed. What about you? My parents bought the cabin before I was born. You come every summer? I used to. What changed? My dad died. The words felt strange leaving my mouth. Emma's expression softened instantly. When? 6 months ago. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't tell me everything happens for a reason. She didn't offer some inspirational quote she'd found online. Instead, she simply nodded. I understand. It was such a small sentence, but somehow it carried enormous weight. You do? She looked toward the lake. My fiancé died almost 2 years ago. The world seemed to stop moving. I'm sorry, I whispered. So am I. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even close, which somehow made it sadder. He was 29. I didn't know what to say. He was driving home after work, she continued quietly. A truck crossed the center line. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of memories, regret, love, pain, things neither of us could fix. I almost didn't come here this summer, she admitted. Why did you? My grandmother asked. I'm glad you did. She looked at me for a long moment. So am I. Over the following weeks, our friendship formed without either of us noticing exactly when it happened. Some mornings we'd drink coffee on the dock before sunrise. Some afternoons we'd kayak across the lake. Other days we'd spend hours talking on the porch while Margaret knitted blankets and occasionally interrupted to correct our opinions on absolutely everything. Emma slowly told me about Daniel. He'd been funny, patient, the kind of man who remembered everyone's birthday. They were 6 months away from getting married. She still wore his engagement ring on a chain around her neck. Not because she couldn't let go, because she wasn't ready to forget. In return, I told her stories about my father, how he'd taught me to fish, how he'd burned every pancake he ever attempted to make, how he'd believed every problem in life could be solved with enough duct tape. For the first time since his death, those stories didn't hurt quite as much to tell. Emma had a way of listening that made painful memories feel lighter. One evening, we sat at the end of the dock, watching hundreds of fireflies drift through the trees. They're beautiful, she whispered. They remind me of stars. She nodded. Daniel used to say, grief is strange. I looked over. He'd say the people we lose never really stop changing us, even after they're gone. I thought about that. My dad would have agreed. You think so? He used to tell me that love doesn't end because someone's heartbeat does. Emma stared out over the water. I like that. So do I. A shooting star streaked across the sky. Without thinking, we both looked at it. Without speaking, we both smiled. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was something quieter. Two wounded souls discovering that healing didn't have to happen alone. Neither of us realized it that night, but somewhere between the storm on the dock and the fireflies over the lake, the loneliness we'd each carried for so long had begun to loosen its grip. And neither of us was quite as alone anymore. August settled over Silver Lake with slow mornings, warm afternoons, and evenings that seemed reluctant to end. The air smelled of pine and fresh-cut grass, and every sunset painted the water in shades of orange and violet that never looked exactly the same twice. By then, seeing Emma had become the most ordinary part of my day, and somehow the part I looked forward to the most. We never planned our mornings anymore. One of us would simply wander down to the dock with 2 mugs of coffee, already assuming the other would show up. Most days, we were right. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we didn't speak at all. I learned that Emma hummed quietly whenever she concentrated, that she always read the last page of a novel first because she couldn't stand uncertainty, that she hated mushrooms with an irrational passion and believed thunderstorms were beautiful because they reminded her that nature didn't care about pretending everything was calm. She learned that I collected old vinyl records, even though I no longer owned a record player, that I couldn't whistle to save my life, that I still reached for my phone whenever something funny happened because my first instinct was to call my father before remembering I couldn't anymore. Those little discoveries somehow mattered just as much as the bigger ones, maybe more. One afternoon, after helping Margaret repaint the porch railing, Emma disappeared into the house and returned carrying an old cardboard box. I found these in the attic. What are they? My grandfather's photographs. She set the box between us. Thousands of old film prints filled the container. Family reunions, fishing trips, birthday parties, 4th of July fireworks, Christmas mornings, entire lives captured in tiny, frozen moments. Emma handed me one photograph. Her grandparents stood on this very dock 40 years earlier. Her grandfather was holding up a massive bass while Margaret laughed so hard she'd accidentally leaned against him. They looked happy. They were. What happened? Grandpa got sick. I'm sorry. He was 84. She smiled gently. Grandma always says she wasn't robbed of time. I looked over. What does she mean? She says some people get 50 years together, some get 5, and some never find each other at all. Emma paused. So she refuses to measure love by how long it lasted. The words lingered in the air. Daniel had only gotten 6 years with Emma. My parents had nearly 35. Different lengths. Neither made the love less real. Margaret opened the screen door behind us. You two still looking through those old pictures? We're trying. Then you're doing it wrong. Emma laughed. How? You don't look at photographs. Margaret picked one up carefully. You remember them. She tapped the picture gently. Otherwise, they're just paper. A week later, Emma invited me into town for the Saturday farmers market. I need peaches. You drove 20 minutes for peaches? I also need tomatoes. Ah, she nodded seriously. Very important distinction. The market buzzed with music and conversation. Children chased bubbles floating through the crowd while local musicians played beneath the gazebo. It felt wonderfully alive. Emma stopped at nearly every stand. She sampled honey, bought fresh bread, talked to strangers like she'd known them forever. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen someone enjoy simple moments that much. Eventually, we reached an elderly man selling handmade birdhouses. He smiled the instant he saw Emma. You're back. I told you I would be. You finally bringing your husband? The smile disappeared from Emma's face so quickly that most people wouldn't have noticed. I did. The old man noticed too. Oh, his expression fell. I'm so sorry. Emma managed a polite smile. It's okay. No, it isn't. He looked genuinely heartbroken by his mistake. After we walked away, neither of us spoke for several minutes. I'm sorry, I finally said. You didn't do anything. I know. She looked down at the paper bag in her hands. It still catches me off guard. What does? The way the world keeps assuming time heals everything. She took a slow breath. People stop asking how you're doing after about 6 months. I noticed. They figure you've moved on. She looked at me. But grief doesn't follow calendars. No. It just changes shape. I nodded. Some days I can laugh without thinking about Daniel. She smiled faintly. Then I'll hear a song we used to dance to, and suddenly it feels like I lost him yesterday. I understood exactly what she meant. There were mornings I still expected to hear my father's truck pull into the driveway. For one impossible second, my mind forgot reality. Then it remembered. Every single time. That evening, rain trapped us inside Margaret's cottage. The power flickered before disappearing altogether. Wonderful, Margaret muttered. Emma lit several candles. Their warm glow transformed the living room into something peaceful. Margaret disappeared upstairs, claiming she intended to sleep through modern inconveniences. Emma and I remained downstairs. I have an idea. She disappeared into a hallway closet before returning with a dusty board game. Scrabble? You scared? I'm competitive. So am I, she smiled. Good. She destroyed me. Absolutely destroyed me. By the time she played jazz across a triple word score, I knew I had no chance. I didn't realize you were secretly a genius. I read dictionaries for fun. I stared. You're joking. I absolutely am. I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. It surprised both of us. Not the laughter, how natural it felt. Emma looked at me differently after that. What? I haven't heard you laugh like that. I guess I forgot how. You didn't. She reached across the table and gently squeezed my hand. You just remembered. The contact lasted maybe 3 seconds, maybe 4. Neither of us pulled away immediately. The room became impossibly quiet. Not awkward, just different. When she finally let go, I noticed my heart beating far faster than it had any reason to. She noticed too. I could tell. Neither of us mentioned it. The next morning, I went fishing alone. Not because I wanted to, because I needed to think. The feeling in my chest scared me. I had spent weeks convincing myself that Emma was becoming my closest friend, nothing more. That somewhere along the way, that had stopped being true. I admired her. I respected her. I cared whether she smiled, whether she'd eaten, whether she'd slept well, whether something was bothering her. Those weren't just friendly thoughts anymore. That realization should have excited me. Instead, it filled me with guilt. How could I be ready to care about someone else when I still cried over my father? Would loving again somehow diminish the people we'd lost? By the time I returned to shore, I still had no answers. Emma was sitting on the dock. She looked up as I approached. You disappeared. I needed some air. She studied me. You've got your thinking face. My what? The one where your eyebrows do this. She demonstrated an exaggerated frown. I laughed despite myself. I don't make that face. You absolutely do. She became serious again. What's wrong? I considered lying. Instead, I sat beside her. I'm confused. About? I watched a fish jump near the reeds. Us. She didn't answer immediately. I've been confused too. My stomach tightened. I keep looking forward to seeing you. So do I. And then I feel guilty for looking forward to seeing you. She closed her eyes. I know. It feels, she finished my sentence, like we're betraying people we loved. The honesty in those words took my breath away. Neither of us had wanted to say it out loud, because saying it made it real. I don't want to replace anyone, I whispered. Emma's eyes filled with tears. You couldn't. No, neither could I. A single tear escaped before she wiped it away. I loved Daniel. I know. I'll always love him. I know. She looked directly at me. But, the word barely came out. But I think I'm starting to care about you. The world seemed to fall silent. No wind, no birds, nothing except the sound of the water gently touching the dock. I had imagined hearing those words 100 different ways. None of them prepared me for how much they would hurt. Not because I didn't want them, because I did, desperately. But I could see exactly what they cost her to admit. I care about you too. She looked down. I was afraid you'd say that. You were? She laughed softly through her tears. It would have been easier if one of us didn't. Probably. But not better. No. She leaned her head against my shoulder, very carefully, almost like she was asking permission without speaking. I didn't move. For several minutes, we sat there in complete silence. Eventually, she whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. I wish Daniel could tell me it's okay. My throat tightened. I wish my dad could tell me too. We stayed there until sunset, neither of us pretending to have answers. Sometimes love doesn't arrive by replacing what came before. Sometimes it grows beside grief, patiently waiting until your heart realizes it was never meant to choose between remembering the past and embracing the future. Neither of us fully believe that yet, but for the first time, we wanted to. And somewhere deep inside both of us, that tiny spark of hope was beginning to outweigh the fear. The morning after our conversation on the dock felt strangely different. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. When I stepped outside with 2 mugs of coffee, Emma was already sitting at the end of the dock with her knees pulled against her chest, watching the mist drift across the lake. She turned when she heard my footsteps, and for a moment, neither of us knew how to greet the other. The night before, we'd admitted what had been quietly growing between us for weeks. Now we had to figure out what it meant. I handed her a mug. "Still 2 sugars?" She smiled. "You remembered." "I remember most things about you." A faint blush colored her cheeks before she looked down at her coffee. "I like that." I sat beside her, careful not to crowd her. "I've been thinking." "Dangerous." "It usually is." She laughed. "I don't think either of us should rush this." She nodded immediately. "I don't want to. I don't want us to wake up 6 months from now wondering if we confused loneliness with love." Her smile faded into something thoughtful. "I've wondered that too. I know what grief can do to people." "So do I. It can make someone reaching for your hand feel like you're finally breathing again." Emma turned toward me. "But what if that's not all this is?" The question lingered between us. "What if," she continued quietly, "the reason we're afraid is because this is real?" I didn't answer, not because I disagreed, because I couldn't. Deep down, I already knew. This wasn't 2 broken people clinging to each other. This was 2 people slowly becoming whole again, together. The next few weeks became a lesson in patience. We didn't call ourselves a couple. We didn't kiss. We simply chose each other every day. Sometimes that looked like painting the weathered fence around Margaret's garden. Sometimes it meant driving 40 minutes just to find the little roadside bakery Emma loved because they made cinnamon rolls exactly the way her mother used to. Sometimes it meant saying nothing at all while watching rain slide down the cabin windows. Love, I realized, wasn't always grand gestures. More often, it was remembering. Remembering how someone liked their coffee. Remembering which songs made them smile. Remembering that Emma always became quiet around sunset because that was the hour Daniel used to get home from work. I never tried to distract her during those moments. I simply stayed. Sometimes the greatest kindness you can offer another person is your presence, nothing more. One Friday afternoon, Margaret insisted we help clean out the old boathouse. "You 2 are young," she pointed dramatically toward the building. "My back isn't." The boathouse smelled of cedar, dust, and decades of summers. Old fishing poles leaned against one wall. Life jackets from another era hung from rusty hooks. Boxes of forgotten memories were stacked nearly to the ceiling. Emma opened a faded wooden trunk. Inside were dozens of handwritten letters tied together with blue ribbon. "They're Grandpa's." Margaret smiled softly. "He wrote me one every week while he was overseas." Emma carefully untied the ribbon. The paper had yellowed with age, but the handwriting remained beautiful. She looked at the first page. "You've never shown me these." I wasn't ready. "And now?" Margaret looked toward the lake through the open door. "I think love should be shared." Emma read aloud. "My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, then another week has passed without me sitting beside you. I keep imagining the little house we'll grow old in someday. I don't know what color the walls will be, or whether we'll have children, or if I'll ever become half the man you already believe I am. But I do know this. Wherever life finally takes us, I hope I never stop earning the way you look at me." Emma stopped reading. She couldn't continue. Neither could I. Margaret smiled through glistening eyes. "He wrote over 200 letters. You saved every one?" "Of course." Emma looked at her grandmother. "How did you survive losing him?" Margaret was quiet for a long time. Finally, she answered, "I didn't." Emma frowned. "What?" "The woman I was before your grandfather died," she smiled sadly. "She disappeared." The room fell silent. I became someone else. Margaret reached over and gently squeezed Emma's hand. "But here's the remarkable part." "What?" "I discovered that becoming someone else isn't always losing yourself. She looked at both of us. Sometimes it's how life teaches you to keep living. Those words settled somewhere deep inside me. Maybe healing wasn't about becoming the person you used to be. Maybe it was about becoming someone new without forgetting who you'd been. The following evening, the town held its annual Summer Lights Festival. Every cottage along the shoreline decorated their docks with lanterns. Live music echoed through the park. Families spread blankets across the grass while children chased each other with glow sticks. Margaret refused to miss it. I've attended every year since 1978. You skipped the pandemic. That wasn't my decision. Emma laughed. I stand corrected. As darkness fell, hundreds of floating lanterns were released onto the lake. Tiny lights drifted across the water like fallen stars. It never gets old, Margaret whispered. Emma stood beside me, watching silently. Without thinking, our hands brushed. This time, neither of us pulled away. Our fingers slowly intertwined. It felt impossibly natural, warm, safe. I looked over. She was smiling, not the polite smile she offered strangers, or the careful smile she'd worn through grief. This one reached her eyes. I've missed feeling happy, she admitted. You deserve to. So do you. We stood hand in hand as fireworks exploded above the lake. For one beautiful moment, life felt uncomplicated. Then I saw him. A man about our age had stopped several yards away. He wasn't watching the fireworks. He was watching Emma. His expression shifted from surprise to confusion to recognition. Emma? She turned. The color drained from her face. Michael. He walked toward us. I can't believe it's you. It's been a while. I heard you were spending the summer here. You heard? Your mom mentioned it. He finally noticed our hands. His smile faltered. I didn't realize you were seeing someone. Emma quietly let go of my hand. Something inside me tightened. Michael looked at me politely. I'm Michael. Noah. We used to work together. Emma nodded. For years. There was an awkward silence. Finally, Michael looked back at her. I've been trying to reach you. My phone changed. I know. I wasn't avoiding you. He smiled gently. I figured. Another pause. I still think about you. Emma froze. So do I. I mean, he took a careful breath. I've wondered if maybe... His voice trailed off. I know it's been 2 years. The sentence landed like a stone. I thought maybe someday... He looked at me again. I guess I was too late. Emma's eyes filled with conflict. I'm sorry. You don't owe me an apology. Michael managed a sad smile. I just wanted you to know. He nodded politely toward me. You seem like a good guy. Then he walked away. Neither Emma nor I moved. The fireworks continued overhead. People cheered around us, but everything suddenly felt distant. I didn't know, I said quietly. I know. You never mentioned him. I didn't think... She stopped herself. I didn't think it mattered. Did you love him? She answered honestly. I almost let myself. The words hurt more than I expected. After Daniel died? She nodded. We got close about a year afterward. What happened? I couldn't do it. Why? Because every time he smiled, she swallowed, I felt guilty. So you ended it, before it ever really started. I stared out across the lake. And now? She didn't answer immediately. Finally, she whispered, I don't know. Those 3 words echoed in my chest long after the fireworks ended. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The cabin felt unbearably quiet. I walked to the dock, expecting to find Emma. She wasn't there. Instead, I found an envelope resting on the weathered boards with my name written across the front in her neat handwriting. Inside was a single page. Noah. Last night made me realize something I should have understood sooner. I care about you more than I've let myself admit, and that's exactly why I need a little time. Not because of Michael, because I don't ever want you wondering whether you're competing with ghosts. You deserve someone who chooses you without hesitation. I want to be certain that when I take your hand again, it's because I'm walking toward our future, not because I'm running from my past. Please don't think this means goodbye. It doesn't. It means I owe both of us complete honesty. Give me a few days. Love has already asked us to be brave once. I think it's asking one more thing of us now. Emma. I folded the letter carefully. Every part of me wanted to drive to her grandmother's cottage, to tell her none of it mattered, to convince her we could figure it out together. But love isn't proven by holding on tighter. Sometimes it's proven by respecting the space another person needs to find their way back to you. So I waited, not because it was easy, because I loved her enough to. The question was no longer whether Emma and I loved each other. We did. The question was whether two hearts that had already survived unimaginable loss could find the courage to trust happiness one more time. Neither of us knew the answer, but somewhere beyond the quiet lake, the end of summer was approaching, and with it, a decision that would change both of our lives forever. The longest 4 days of my life began with silence. Not the peaceful kinds Emma and I had always shared on the dock. This silence felt unfinished. Every morning, I carried 2 mugs of coffee down to the water before remembering there was only one person to drink it. Every evening, I caught myself glancing toward Margaret's cottage whenever I heard a car door close. Twice, I almost walked over. Twice, I turned around. Emma had asked for time. If I loved her, and by then there was no question that I did, I had to trust her enough to give it. So I waited. The hardest part of loving someone isn't always finding them. Sometimes it's believing they'll come back. On the third afternoon, I decided to clean out the attic in my parents' cabin. It was something I'd avoided all summer. Every dusty box seemed to contain another version of my father. His old fishing reels, a cracked tackle box held together with electrical tape, the faded flannel shirt he insisted was still perfectly good, despite my mother's constant protests. By late afternoon, I was sitting cross-legged on the wooden floor, surrounded by decades of memories. At the back of an old cedar chest, beneath yellowed newspapers and faded Christmas decorations, I found a small oak box. My name was written across the lid, in my father's handwriting. For a long time, I couldn't make myself open it. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside lay a pocket watch, a handful of old photographs, and a single sealed envelope. The paper was dated nearly 8 years earlier. I unfolded it carefully. Noah, if you're reading this, then I'm probably gone. I hope that's many years from now. If it isn't, then I'm sorry life turned out differently than I planned. There are 1,000 things fathers hope they get enough time to teach their sons. We almost never do. So here's one I don't want you learning too late. Love is never divided. It's multiplied. One day you'll lose people you can't imagine living without. When that happens, don't make the mistake of believing your heart only has room for one great love at a time. Loving someone new doesn't betray the people you've already loved. If anything, it's proof they taught you how. Your mother never stopped loving the grandparents she buried. That never stopped her from loving me with her whole heart. And if I leave before she does, I hope she falls in love again. I really mean that. Because grief isn't the opposite of love. It's love with nowhere to go. Don't let yours stay homeless forever. Keep giving it somewhere to live. I'm proud of the man you're becoming. Always. Love, Dad. By the time I reached the bottom of the page, I couldn't see the words anymore. My vision blurred with tears I've been holding back for months. I cried harder than I had since the funeral. Not because the letter reminded me he was gone, because somehow it reminded me he was still teaching me, even now. That evening there was a knock on my cabin door. I already knew who it was. Emma stood on the porch. Her eyes were red. She looked exhausted, but she smiled. Hi. Hi. I hope I'm not interrupting. I've been hoping you'd come. She glanced toward the letter still resting on the kitchen table. I can come back. No. I stepped aside. Please. She walked in slowly, taking in the little cabin she'd heard so many stories about but had never actually entered. It's exactly how I imagined. My mom says that's because my dad never changed anything. I picked up the letter. I found this today. She saw the tears in my eyes. You've been crying. I have. She waited. I handed her the letter without saying anything. She read it silently. Halfway through, tears rolled down her cheeks. When she finished, she pressed the paper gently against her chest. I wish I'd met him. You would have liked him. I already do. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, she looked at me. I think your father answered the question I've been asking myself. I swallowed. What question? Whether loving you means letting go of Daniel. She shook her head slowly. It doesn't. She wiped away another tear. It means carrying him differently. I felt my throat tighten. I spent 4 days thinking about Michael. I waited. Not because I wanted to be with him, she smiled sadly, but because I needed to understand why I couldn't. She stepped closer. He was kind. He was patient. He deserved a chance. So why couldn't I love him? She looked directly into my eyes. Because every time I imagined a future with him, she paused, it felt like I was trying to replace someone. Another step. But when I imagine a future with you, now she was standing only inches away, it doesn't feel like replacing anything. Her voice cracked. It feels like continuing my life. I closed my eyes for just a second. Relief washed over me so suddenly that I almost laughed, almost cried again, maybe both. I was so afraid. So was I. I thought I'd lose you. You almost did, she smiled through tears. Not because I stopped loving you, because I needed to make sure I wasn't afraid of loving you. I reached for her hand. This time she didn't hesitate. She laced her fingers through mine with quiet certainty. I choose you, Noah. No conditions, no uncertainty, no guilt, just truth. I choose you too. Our first kiss wasn't dramatic. There was no thunderstorm, no orchestra, no crowd applauding. It happened quietly in the kitchen of an old lake cabin, while the evening sunlight spilled through the windows. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't desperate, it felt like coming home. When we finally pulled apart, Emma laughed softly. What? I waited all this time. Worth it? She smiled the kind of smile I'd only seen once before, brighter this time, completely. Summer faded into autumn. The leaves around Silver Lake turned gold, then crimson. Neither of us wanted to leave. But real life eventually called us home. Emma returned to the city where she'd worked as an occupational therapist before taking the summer off. I went back to my job as a civil engineer. The distance wasn't easy. 3 hours by car suddenly felt much farther. Every Friday evening, one of us drove to the other. Sometimes we'd meet halfway at a little diner neither of us particularly liked, simply because it gave us another excuse to spend an hour together. We learned that love wasn't built during vacations. It was built in ordinary Tuesdays, phone calls during traffic, cooking dinner together after exhausting workdays, helping assemble impossible furniture, holding each other after difficult weeks. It wasn't glamorous, it was real, and somehow, real was even better. The following spring, Margaret called me unexpectedly. You should probably get over here. Is everything okay? Just come. When I arrived at the cottage, Emma was sitting on the dock. She looked nervous. Margaret winked as she walked past me toward the house. I suddenly remembered I have absolutely nothing to do out here. She disappeared inside. Emma laughed. She planned this. I had a feeling. We sat together for a few minutes. I've been thinking about something. Uh-oh, she smiled. Do you remember what Grandma said? She says a lot of things. About love. I thought for a moment. Don't measure it by how long it lasts. She nodded. I finally understand what she meant. I looked at her. I used to think the happiest years of my life had already happened. She squeezed my hand. Now I think they were preparing me for these. I took a slow breath. There are moments in life when you realize the future you've been imagining is suddenly standing right in front of you. This was one of them. I reached into my jacket pocket. Emma noticed immediately. Oh, my hands were shaking. I'm terrible at speeches. You are. Thanks. She laughed. I've been practicing this for weeks. I can tell. I've rewritten it at least 40 times. You didn't have to. I know. I knelt anyway. Emma Carter, my voice caught. I loved the woman you were before I met you. She frowned. You did? I loved her because she made you who you are. I took the ring from the box. I'll never ask you to stop loving Daniel. Tears filled her eyes. I'll never stop loving my father. She nodded. We don't have to. No, we get to carry them with us. I smiled. But I also know this. I looked into her eyes. I want every tomorrow I have left to begin beside you. The lake was perfectly still. So, I laughed nervously. Will you marry me? Emma covered her mouth as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she dropped to her knees in front of me. She wrapped both arms around my neck and whispered the only word I needed to hear. Yes. A year later, the wedding took place exactly where our story had begun, on the old dock. Silver Lake shimmered beneath a clear summer sky. Wildflowers lined the aisle. Friends and family filled the shoreline. Margaret insisted on walking Emma the final few steps herself. You've got this, she whispered. I know. As Emma reached me, I noticed something around her neck. Daniel's ring, still resting on its chain. She caught me looking. I'll always carry him. I smiled. I know. She touched my chest gently, and now I carry us too. During the ceremony, the officiant spoke about how love grows, how hearts expand rather than replace, how every chapter of our lives shapes the next. As we exchanged vows, I glanced across the crowd. My mother was crying. Rachel was smiling through tears. Margaret stood proudly in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief she'd insisted she wouldn't need. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, applause echoed across the lake. I kissed Emma beneath the same summer sky where we'd once been two strangers trying to survive impossible losses. Now we stood together, not because the grief had disappeared, because love had learned to live beside it. Years later, people would ask us how we met. We always smiled. On a dock. It sounded too simple. They never saw the storms that came before it, the heartbreak, the waiting, the healing, or the courage it took for two broken hearts to believe that life could still surprise them. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Emma and I would sit together at the edge of the dock while our children skipped stones across Silver Lake. She would lean against my shoulder. I'd take her hand. Neither of us needed to say much. The lake remembered. So did we. And every now and then, when the fireflies rose from the shoreline and the wind whispered through the pines, it felt as though everyone we'd ever loved was somehow still with us, not holding us back, but gently pushing us forward. Because love was never something that ended, it simply changed shape. And if you were fortunate enough to open your heart again, you discovered the most beautiful truth of all. The heart was never built to choose between the people it loved. It was built to make room for every one of them.